This is a moment when diplomacy, economics, and national security collide, and when the ripple effects of a regional confrontation are being felt far beyond any battlefield. Over the last week, as tensions between the United States and Iran have played out around one of the world's most important maritime choke points, one industry in particular says it is being pushed toward the edge: commercial aviation. What follows is a close look at what's at stake for travelers and taxpayers, how oil markets are reacting, and why some diplomatic moves in Geneva and New York may matter as much to balance sheets as they do to geopolitics. A growing chorus of executives at budget carriers and the trade associations that represent them have gone public with a simple, urgent message. Soaring jet fuel costs tied to instability in the Strait of Hormuz are squeezing margins, disrupting planning, and they warn putting cheaper fares at risk. In reports issued on April 28, a trade group representing Value, Dash-oriented U.S. carriers said it has asked the federal government for emergency support, roughly $2.5 billion, to blunt the impact of a sustained spike in fuel prices. For years, low-cost airlines have run on lean margins and tight operational models. Their business depends on predictable fuel costs, fast aircraft turnarounds, and the ability to keep fares low while filling seats. When fuel spikes unexpectedly, the math changes quickly. Higher fuel bills can mean fewer routes, thinner promotions, or, as the trade group argues, the elimination of smaller carriers unable to weather price shocks. The appeal for temporary government relief, the group says, is not merely a bailout. It is a measure to preserve competition and protect consumers from a market that could consolidate around deeper-pocketed legacy carriers. Executives at one low-cost carrier said they are in talks with the government about financing arrangements that could stabilize operations for that airline. The proposed support would come as it navigates what industry insiders describe as extraordinary pressure after recent financial turbulence. Whatever the final shape of any assistance, the request underscores how tightly global energy markets and local consumer services are now linked. When oil climbs, the bill is not just for nations. It lands in airport terminals and online booking engines. The immediate driver is the disruption of supply in the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which a significant share of the world's seaborne oil passes. Shipping delays, threats to tankers, and periodic interdictions through the strait have a direct effect on global crude availability. Market psychology compounds the effect. When traders see increased risk of supply interruptions, prices can accelerate as buyers scramble for cargoes and governments draw from reserves. On April 28, those market ripples reportedly pushed Brent crude past the $110 per barrel mark, a sharp move that has reverberated act. Ross Industries, from airlines to manufacturing and household budgets. For travelers, the most immediate consequence may be less choice and more expensive tickets. Budget carriers, more exposed to fuel price swings because of thinner hedging positions and smaller balance sheets, can find themselves forced to cancel routes or reduce frequency. For regulators and policymakers, the question becomes whether short-term intervention to lighten carriers' fuel bills is preferable to letting market forces play out, a choice with political as well as economic consequences. Beyond the immediate economics, the unfolding events are driving a flurry of diplomacy. On the same April 28 timeline, officials in Washington reportedly reacted coolly to an Iranian proposal aimed at reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The reaction from U.S. officials, as described by sources briefed on discussions, was that the offer failed to address deeper strategic concerns, notably questions tied to nuclear programs and broader regional behavior. One senior official was quoted as saying the proposal fell short of Washington's priorities and would likely prompt a counteroffer in the days ahead. Diplomacy in this moment is not only about preventing tankers from being harassed at sea, it is about the broader leverage that comes from controlling access to energy and from shaping the narratives at international forums. A single diplomatic gesture that reopens a maritime lane can ease supply fears, calming markets, but gestures that don't tackle core security anxieties risk doing little to reassure foreign capitals that long-standing worries have been resolved. Complicating matters further is what happened inside the halls of international diplomacy. At a recent review conference on nuclear non-proliferation, Iran was chosen to serve in a vice presidential capacity for the proceedings, a diplomatic boost that prompted sharp and public criticism from several Western delegations. The nomination came through a bloc of states aligned with a broader movement that advocates for a rebalanced approach to nuclear governance, arguing for both disarmament and the right to peaceful nuclear technology. The election of an Iranian representative to a leadership position in a non-proliferation forum brought an unusually heated exchange on the floor. U.S. diplomats, frustrated and vocal, described the outcome as unacceptable. Several allied delegations expressed concerns. At the same time, other major powers pushed back against what they characterized as efforts to single out one country. The result was a public spectacle that exposed deep divisions among states about how to manage nuclear norms and who gets to shape the rules. In response to the criticism, Iran's envoy rejected the accusations as politically motivated and offered a sharp counterpoint. He accused Washington of double standards, noting that the United States is the only country to have used nuclear weapons in war and claiming that America policy has for years exempted allies from scrutiny. Whether one agrees with his framing or not, the exchange made plain that the dispute is as much about history and perception as it is about technical compliance with treaty obligations. Those perceptions matter for bargaining. They shape who trusts whom, which in turn influences whether diplomatic deals can hold. Taken together, the rising fuel costs, the appeals for government support, the complicated diplomatic dance, the picture is one of cascading vulnerabilities. Airlines warn of immediate economic pain. Consumers may see higher fares and fewer flight options. Governments face political pressure to act, whether to support domestic airlines, release strategic oil reserves, or pressure parties to de-escalate at sea. Markets, meanwhile, are sensitive to both actual supply flows and the sense that future supply might be constrained. What options are available for oil markets? The most direct short-term tool is the release O. As strategic reserves, coordinated or otherwise, to increase available supply and tamp down prices. Governments can also pursue diplomatic channels to reduce the risk to shipping, more escorts, clearer rules of engagement, or arm's-length mediation between maritime actors. For airlines, policy options include time-limited subsidies, low-interest loans, temporary tax relief tied to fuel consumption, and regulatory measures that support competition. Each of those options carries trade-offs. Some of these can be politically unpopular and expensive. Loans may shift future risk to taxpayers, and regulatory fixes can take months to implement. There is also a question of fairness and precedent. If one government moves to help airlines now, others may be asked to do the same. If relief is targeted to preserve competition, as the trade group argued, governments will need to craft measures that support smaller carriers without simply reinforcing the dominance of bigger ones. That's a delicate politic calculus at a time when voters are already feeling the pinch of higher fuel and energy bills. Beyond economics and policy, what we are witnessing underscores a deeper strategic lesson. In an interconnected world, localized conflicts can create global economic shocks. A naval incident in a narrow strait can translate into higher grocery bills or more expensive flights halfway around the globe. That reality makes diplomacy more than a nicety. It turns it into a vital economic stabilizer. For that reason, even technical exchanges about nuclear safeguards or maritime protocols have outsized consequences. As analysts consider next steps, Washington is reportedly preparing a response to Iran's proposal, and officials expect further back and forth in the coming days. What shape that counterproposal will take, whether it ties relief measures directly to verifiable nuclear constraints or whether it focuses on reopening maritime commerce first, will be a key signal to markets and to all. For airlines and passengers, clarity and predictability are what matter most. Markets dislike uncertainty. Clear progress towards safe shipping lanes and stabilized energy supplies would likely provide the quickest relief. Amid these high-level disputes, the human dimension remains striking. Airport workers, pilots, and flight crews see schedules change. Small business owners who rely on affordable travel for cargo or commerce recalculate plans. Families planning vacations watch ticket prices and route availability. Those are micro-level effects that aggregate into macroeconomic consequences, and they are the reason governments often feel compelled to act when shocks start to bite. Interwoven with this economic story are the broader geostrategic threats. The partnership between the United States and several other major democracies was cited by officials as central to pressure campaigns and diplomatic strategy. The relationship between the U.S. and key regional partners, as well as with rising powers who resist efforts to single out one state, will shape whether multilateral mechanisms can be used effectively to diffuse tensions. For many observers, the current moment is a reminder that diplomatic contests play out not only in capital cities, but in commodity markets, shipping lanes, and airline booking systems. As we follow these developments, a few clear questions stand out. Will governments coordinate to blunt near-term energy shocks? Will the airline sector receive targeted relief designed to preserve competition? Can diplomatic channels turn a fragile pause in hostilities into a more durable solution that keeps shipping lanes open? And finally, will the international community find a way to reconcile long-standing disagreements over nuclear governance with the urgent need to stabilize markets? There is no single answer. What is clear, however, is the urgency. When maritime routes are threatened, the consequences are immediate. Commodities move, prices rise, and ripple effects touch ordinary lives. When diplomatic forums become battlegrounds for legitimacy, the credibility of institutions designed to manage those crises is put to the test. Before we close, two short voices from the scene capture the stakes in different registers. One observer remarked, the relationship with India is probably the most important bilateral relationship the U.S. will have for the rest of this century. That comment speaks to the long view, to alliances and economic partnerships that will shape the decades to come. And in another moment, a call to civic purpose was heard distinctly for the good of our nation. Let's work together and let's truly make America great again. Whether framed as a plea for unity or as political shorthand for a broader agenda, the line underscores the way national narratives are rallied in times of stress. What happens next will be shaped by choices made in three arenas. The oil market, where traders and producers balance short teat. Supply with strategic reserves, the skies where airlines and regulators decide how to protect competition and service, and the diplomatic rooms where leaders parse offers, counteroffers, and the terms that might restore confidence. Each decision reverberates across the others. For travelers, the immediate advice is straightforward: expect volatility. Watch fares closely, be prepared for schedule changes, and plan for contingencies. For policymakers, the challenge is tougher. Design responses that relieve immediate stress without creating perverse incentives or long-term fiscal burdens. For negotiators, the task is to translate narrow technical offers into broader credibility, to ensure that reopening is straight or signing an agreement actually reduces risk in a way markets can trust. We are living through an episode that demonstrates how quickly regional tensions can turn into global economic questions. It is a reminder that in the modern era, the line between geopolitics and gray, Oshri builds is far thinner than many imagine. In the days ahead, the world will be watching to see whether diplomacy can calm markets, whether policy can ease pressures on airlines, and whether leaders can convert fragile pauses into lasting stability. Until then, the watchwords will be vigilance, clarity, and a willingness to act where markets and people are most exposed.